This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
Before we get started with this month's podcast, did you know that support for the Forest Ramble comes from Manscaped, the best in men's below-the-belt grooming? Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels.
Yes, Manscaped has redesigned the electric trimmer. The Lawnmower 2.0 has advanced skin-safe technology, so it won't disturb your gentleman's agreement.
Is it waterproof?
It's also waterproof, so you can use it in the shower.
So the Lawnmower 2.0, well, that's part of the Perfect Package 2.0. Apparently, I've been told it has everything you need to keep trimmed, cut-free and smelling good in all the right places, wherever they might be.
The package also includes the Crop Preserver, and that's an anti-chafing deodorant and moisturiser. You already put deodorant on your armpits, don't you? So why not do it on the most important part of your body?
OK, well, the Perfect Package is cruelty-free, paraben-free and vegan. Comes with a pair of Manscaped boxer briefs, so it's time to upgrade that old pair of kecks to Manscaped's high-performance Lucky Pants.
'Tis the season to Manscape. So
Is it now?
It is. Get yourself, your brother and your mates the best gift of all, the Manscaped Perfect Package 2.0, as featured in GQ in Men's Health.
US listeners can get 20% off and free shipping with the code BIGHEADS at manscaped.com.
And if you are not in the US, then check out Manscaped products via Amazon.
Great. Manscaped, the perfect gentleman's agreement this Christmas. Now let's get on with that podcast. In December's Forest Ramble podcast, the Lewis Grabban edition. Is he the best forward we've seen at the City Ground in the last 20 years? Hi there, I am joined by Mr. Stephen Topless.
Hello.
And Mr. Maradon in the Midlands.
Ho, ho, ho.
And festive greetings to you all. And we are recording this, well, day after what was a bit of a shock to the system, really.
You might have predicted Forest to lose the game, given the way that their form has tailed off a bit over the last couple of games. But you would never have had that team to be 4-0 down. And certainly not at home in the first half of a game. It really was just a complete shock.
I mean, obviously, you've done your post-mortem on the game already, and, of course, listeners, feel free to go back to it. It only came out a couple of days ago. But Maradon in the Midlands, my gut tells me, you know what, let's just put this down as being a one-off, a very, very bad 45 minutes at the office.
I'm not sure if that's exactly the case. Well, when I saw the starting lineup, I pretty much thought to myself, we are going to lose this. I thought the balance was slightly wrong. I've gone on record in previous podcasts as saying that I don't think Silva and Carvalho can play in the midfield at the same time, starting games at least. And against a big, strong physical side like Wednesday, I was quite worried. Obviously, I didn't predict we'd get smashed 4-0 by half time, but I thought we're probably going to lose this.
But given that the season has been built upon defensive solidity, it's definitely a shock to concede 4 goals, never mind 4 goals in 45 minutes at home.
Sure, yeah, that part's a shock. I'm looking at the goals. Most of them you can put down some sort of individual errors. First one, Dawson missed his header, allowed the Wednesday forward to get the flick on. The other couple of losing markers in the set pieces and not stopping crosses. It was basic stuff, but all avoidable in normal course of play.
Now, it's also worth saying, and Stephen, I don't know what you think about this, but it's worth saying that in pre-season, when we're thinking about the tactics that Sabri LaMouche was going to bring, and we will expand upon this a little bit later, but one of the concerns was, well, does he favour zonal marking? And as we've discussed on many occasions in the past, I don't particularly like zonal marking. I've never really seen a zone score a goal. But it seems that we've seen that come up a couple of times recently. You know, against Millwall, Rafa Mir and Alpha Semedo completely failed to pick up the Millwall midfielder who scored the first goal as a free header from a corner. So something not quite right there. Is this maybe as a result of not having time on the training ground when it's match after match after match?
I think that is an element of it. This team is still fairly fresh and fairly new. And so too is the manager. He's only been in the job for a couple of months. And success doesn't come overnight. And you are going to have these periods where things perhaps aren't quite working, and you've got to find a way of getting out the other side of that. What I will say on the zonal marking thing is, it hasn't been a problem all season. I think, if anything, we've been pretty good at defending set pieces. Up until the Millwall game, I can't think of many occasions where we've given goals away off set plays, corners, free kicks, that sort of thing. We've generally been quite solid at the back. So that's probably what makes certainly the Sheffield Wednesday game even more shocking and even more surprising. And I look at what happened in that match, and I think that is just players not doing their jobs. I don't think that comes down to the manager or the coaching. I think a lot of those goals come from individuals not doing their jobs like they should be doing.
And also, I think it's been coming maybe a little bit because they've been a little bit off form the last few games. It's been a slow deterioration. Just going, maybe a few players are a little bit off form. We've seen sort of players making a couple of mistakes which they wouldn't normally make. People, but maybe Sambar against Millwall, Dawson yesterday, Robinson against Middlesbrough, just doing individual errors. That there is one big missing factor which has sort of caused a downturn in problems. The obvious one is the missing Sambar. We've just not looked the same team without him. I've done a little bit of statistical analysis here, and with him starting a game, we've got a win percentage of 86%. Without him starting a game, we've got a win percentage of 20%. We've only won 3 league games all season when Sambar hasn't started a game. I think that he's made such a big difference, and he's maybe helped players alongside him play better, made them look like better players. He helps the solidity, but he also helps going forward. So I think that's been a major reason for our downturn in form in the last few weeks.
Well, it's hard to disagree with that, because he came in and without kind of being too flashy, he was just really effective, wasn't he? And so I think we're all also. The other thing that was notable is that he came in and he took to the Championship straight away, without sort of needing time to adapt. Yeah. And usually, and in fairness, I would say that on a slightly different topic, the recruitment by Forest over the summer, the players who've come in, they haven't needed a huge amount of time to adapt, which is refreshing when you're bringing in overseas talent. So to me, that suggests that the recruitment policy that we've talked about in previous months, that's another sign that things are potentially working. And we will come back to recruitment a little bit later. Were there signs over the last month that a heavy defeat was coming, Stephen?
I wouldn't say a heavy defeat. I just think defeats were... Mm-hmm. I think yesterday a lot of fans would have not been surprised if Forest had lost the game, given the way that the form has tailed off sort of since QPR. And also looking at games like Cardiff, where we've been beaten at home. All right, we've created 32 opportunities, haven't taken them, but haven't been good enough to win the game. So I think I wouldn't say a heavy defeat was coming, but I certainly think you could see defeats on the way. It's just been a steady decline over the last couple of games. So
okay,
the thing is now, we've just got to find a way of turning it around. And I'm hoping, given the nature of this defeat and how bad it's been, that shocks the players into a reaction, and we see that at Huddersfield next Saturday.
Well, okay, so Sabri himself said, "I'm very surprised, I am shocked, I'm ashamed of this performance. This is my first time apologising to Forest fans, and I hope it is the last. It is a big disappointment for me, for the players, for the fans and their families." And he said that he was the only one responsible for the manner of defeat. The other thing that was quite interesting is asked about, making changes, making substitutions, that is. And he left the same players on for 90 minutes, which is unheard of in these. And he said 3 substitutions wouldn't have been enough.
Yeah, Brian Laws had an interesting perspective on it. He called it actually quite early on, more or less at half-time. He said, I wouldn't change a thing in the second half because it's not fair on the players coming on to be tarnished with that defeat. Yeah. Just let the players out there take it and take their punishment.
Well, I think so. There's 2 aspects there, isn't there? So I think it's quite an astute comment, that. So firstly, yeah, is it fair if you ask Lolly to come on? who we know is one of our more sort of threatening players in terms of he runs at defenders and so on. If he comes on and doesn't make a difference or scores just a consolation with 5 minutes to go, then he's part of the team that got a heavy defeat at home. So there is that, and it might be damaging for him. But the bit that I'm more interested in is, okay, we had 11 players on there who had to stay out there for 90 minutes and basically, like Laws said, take their punishment.
Yeah.
They had to stand there and be held responsible and accountable by the fans who were at the match, by the fans who left the match early, and by the fans who are listening on the radio or, just watching it on live text or whatever.
It may have been different if we had a midweek game. We can throw that into the mix. He may have made a couple of substitutions then. The fact we've got a free week sort of gave him the luxury to do that, I suppose. But yeah, I don't think it would have made any difference. Sheffield Wednesday just killed the game, and I think he knew that.
We weren't going to win it 5-4.
We weren't going to win it 5. We weren't even going to get a goal. So I think he just sort of cut his losses. Said just run. I don't think it was a physically demanding game in the second half. So I think he just let them get on with it.
Okay, but that does also bring us into one of the other things that maybe is a factor, which is that, Stephen, you mentioned earlier about the demands on the players so far in the season, and you've mentioned it a few times as well. Is it also that the Championship's a proper slog? We've used a relatively small core of players compared to previous seasons. Is it that some of them are just maybe a little bit knackered, maybe carrying little niggles and so on?
I think it is, and I think it shows. We'll probably come on to the recruitment later on, but I think it shows that we do need reinforcements in January. I think the starting 11 is top 6, but I'm not sure that the replacements and the reserve players are backing that up. I think they're dragging the quality of the squad down to sort of between 8th and 12th. I don't think the squad as an overall is quite at a playoff standard yet.
I disagree with that slightly. I think he's not really used the squad to its maximum in the last few weeks. Early on in the season, he was sort of swapping Amiobi and Adoma around, getting freshness out of those two. We've been unlucky that Jenkinson got injured, so Kashi's been sort of left to play at right back, and that's robbed us the opportunity of maybe giving him a run up in on the right wing and maybe resting Lolly. I think the big one that's really hurt us, which I just don't understand at all, is why Bostock hasn't played. For me, he's a natural. I mentioned this last time as well, so I won't go on about it too much. But for me, he's a natural replacement for Sambar. He's physically, he's got the stature, and he can get his boot in, and he can spray some passes around. And I don't understand why he has.
I don't know. I'm not sure I agree with you, because I think Sambar he's a box to boxer, and he's a lot more fit. Bostock, although he's a big guy, he's not actually that physical. To me, Semedo is the obvious one, but Semedo's kind of come in and done a little bit here and a little bit there.
But he was injured as well. I'm talking sort of ever since Sau's been injured. Mm-hmm. I just don't understand why we haven't used Bostock.
It seems odd that he's barely been in the squad in that time.
Unless there's something going on in the background that we don't know of.
I don't think so, because he was on the bench a couple of matches.
So for me, that's a mystery. I think he's got that sort of passing ability. I think back to the League Cup game earlier on in the season, where he picked out that brilliant pass for Silva to score. And we haven't got enough players who are able to pick out forward passes. A lot of our attacks are
I think I've got an answer to that, and this goes back to something that Baz has said in some of his match reports earlier, which is that for LaMouche, I think that the secret to being an effective attacking unit isn't necessarily that your central midfielders spray the ball around, it's that they can bring the ball forward. So your Saus and your Semedos, to a certain extent your Watsons and your Yateses, to bring the ball forward and then not necessarily do the Hollywood passes, but run with it and then bring it out that way, and then maybe pass it to a winger or someone else or a number 10 who can do something with it.
Yeah, for all his qualities, I don't think Yates has got that creativity. But once he's on the ball, he'll work hard, he'll give you energy, he'll give you legs.
But he can run with the ball, and then once he gets into trouble, he'll pass it to Lolly or pass it to Silva or whoever. In theory, and I would also back that up with the fact that an article by Paul Taylor was saying something to the effect of that LaMouche likes Yates because Yates reminds him of himself when he was younger. So not necessarily the most supremely talented, but sitting in that kind of role where he's most happy, kind of in front of the back four, but able to bring it out as well.
Yeah, and if you look at the goal he scored against Middlesbrough, that was where he had the ball in the centre of the park, played it out wide and kept a run going.
Yeah.
But I think that's the exception rather than the rule, wasn't it? It wasn't... I was very happy to see him score that goal. So I thought, yes, they finally got it. They know what they have to do now. They need that runner because he was sitting very deep in that game. And I was thinking to myself, just push forward, just get extra men beyond Grabban into the box. I thought, yes, it's clicked with them. That's what they have to do. And they had Cash up forward on the wing then at that time as well. It just doesn't happen enough. And I think going back to not using his squad enough as well, I think we maybe flogged Silva a little after praising him so highly in the last podcast. I think we've taken away from him by making him play in that deeper role while Yates was out. And that's taken away some of the attacking threat we had. And he's I think playing every single game we've tied him out as well. I would have rather him sort of stay forward and put Bostock in the position he's been playing, and then we could have alternated between Silva and Carvalho, keeping the freshness there. And again, going back to the point of not using the squad to its most effective. That's my point of view, anyway.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine, and I'm not saying I disagree with you. That also brings us back, apart from the issue of fatigue and squad depth and so on. It also brings us back to the idea about not necessarily tactics, because I've just talked about tactics there, but formations. And as regular listeners to this podcast will know, I'm very keen on making the point that tactics and formations are not necessarily the same thing. He's gone to a 4-2-3-1 quite a lot recently. And I think Forest have been at their best when they're 4-1-4-1. And I think the Millwall debacle of playing those, three centre-halves with wing-backs showed that those strengths, I mentioned it in my match report, showed that those strengths come from Forest having the kind of the width and as well as the depth in the middle of the park, which 4-1-4-1 does, because it enables Watson to sit back as an auxiliary sort of anchorman, I suppose, auxiliary defender / auxiliary midfielder. It enables the two players in the wide positions to double up, and then it still gives you some strength in the centre of the park, allowing your box-to-box players to do that. And Yates, I think, has done very well when he's been doing that box-to-box role, not sitting back as one of the two at the back. So I think that's where we get the best out of it. Now, with the personnel we had out yesterday and against Middlesbrough, we could have still done that, but we didn't. Stephen, have you got any... I don't know what you think about it. I'm just throwing it out there.
I think there's been a bit too much tinkering at times. The example yesterday is putting Carvalho on the left wing, where I don't think he's very effective. He's not a winger. To get the best out of João Carvalho, you play him as a number 10, and you just give him that freedom to play as a number 10. Especially when you've got a Doma on the bench who, can't get much game time. Why is he not starting on the wing? If you're going to drop Lolly, which I do see why he did that, because Lolly was ineffective against Middlesbrough, and his form hasn't been the best recently. You've got the options there to play that slightly more conventional style. Just get your wingers on the pitch, get your players in the right positions. You don't have to tinker too much.
Yeah, I agree with Stephen. I've just found the loss in form is almost, to me, been self-inflicted. We'd stumbled on across a way of playing earlier in the season where we were solid and yet we still created goals. And I would just wish Sabri had the confidence to just say, this is our style, this is how we're going to play, and it's up to the opposition to worry about us. Because it was a really effective way of doing it. And I think it's just almost tinkered tinkering with the formation, the team. It's just almost played ourselves out of form.
And of course, this is the same accusation we made about LaMouche about the Wigan match, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Actually, basically, he messed about with it, and we paid the price.
For me, that was a much tougher game, Millwall away, than Middlesbrough at home. He should have gone to our strongest formation, strongest team, win it, and then give Mir a chance in the home game against Middlesbrough. Maybe I feel really sorry for him because the first half against Millwall, he didn't have a fighting chance. He didn't have a fighting chance. Then he got stuck on the left wing, and then he gets criticised being, this terrible striker who's never going to do anything. He had 3 touches of the ball in the whole first half.
Yeah, but, if there's anything that we know as football fans, it's just that what people shout about isn't necessarily the most reasoned argument.
Yeah, I just think give him a fighting chance. Playing with our strongest other 10 players in the formation that they're all used to playing and see what he does then, rather than just probably he's been hung out to dry a couple of times.
I think you give him a home game where we're going to hopefully have more of the ball and more attacking impetus, and then let's see what he's about. But what I will say, just mentioning there about home and away, the way that we are set up from Sabri works brilliantly away from home, and it has done all season. When you look at the stats, Forest are third, only behind West Brom and Leeds in the away form table. Played 11, won 5, drawn 5, and lost only once on the road. That's a fantastic set of numbers, whichever way you look at it. But if you look at the home form, Forest are 20th in the table.
20th? That's pretty damning, that is.
Yeah, so they've played 10, won 4, drawn 2, and lost 4. So 20 points gained on the road already, and 14 gained at home. Mm-hmm. So you're seeing really where one of the main problems is. This team needs to find a way of winning games at home more regularly. And looking at, I think, the Middlesbrough game and Sheffield Wednesday are good examples of this, where we just, at the moment, we're not incisive enough. And I don't know if that's down to the players or if that's down to the tactics, where we're happy to pass the ball around. Especially against Middlesbrough, it was all passing to feet, and it was fine, but there was no passing into space. There were no runners. There wasn't enough movement to really try and open up teams, and that's something we need to work on, especially
I think we've become quite predictable as well. We go down the flanks, and then when Lolly's on the ball, he's going to cut in on his left foot and have a shot or. So it's become quite easy for teams to sort of defend against, I think, in that sense.
Okay, I've got 2 things I want to say. So firstly, one thing I will say is that possession stats. Every time we have the majority of possession in a match, we lose.
But to counter that, they haven't been staggeringly high percent. Even in those games, they've only been like sort of 55%.
But the majority. I mean that in the most sort of straight down the line sense, dictionary definition sense. Well, we've had more than 50% possession in a match, we lose.
Yeah.
That brings me on to the other factor there, which is, and you've both touched upon it, have we just been found out? So the Cardiff match, Baz's match report made the point in the Cardiff match. Cardiff decided what we're going to do is we're going to defend deep and we're going to defend central. So Forest had the ball in midfield and they were able to get it out wide, but they weren't able to get crosses in. If they'd been able to get some decent crosses in, then the defenders, their big defenders, were there in the middle to try and cut them out. So in that sense, have we been found out?
A little bit, but I think the players, going back to missing Sambar, I think the players around him have confidence to go forward and maybe flood the box a little bit more when he's playing, because they know they've got that insurance policy that he's going to clean up everything. So it maybe stops people like Cash and Robinson going forward. We've been unlucky in that Ribeiro got injured as well, because he adds an extra attacking dimension as well. And the number 10s, whoever we played in that role, whether it's Silva or Carvalho or whoever in the last few games, just haven't touched the ball, basically. Haven't really been in the game.
Well, to me, that's another argument for going 4-1-4-1 rather than 4-2-3-1, because that number 10 role is, if you're in the number 10 in a 4-2-3-1, then there's every chance you're not going to touch the ball at all, unless, because tactics and formations.
Even Lewis Grabban hasn't really touched the ball the last 2 home games.
Well, we're going to come back to him later, okay? But if you're a number 10 in a 4-2-3-1, playing the tactics that LaMouche favours, then you are really going to struggle to do things. And with Grabban, it's slightly different because he's the centre forward, so he's still able to get into those positions in the box, which means that. And that's why he's got such a good strike rate in terms of our chances to goals rate.
Earlier on in the season, we commented about how he was doing stuff outside the box as well.
Mm-hmm.
Look back at the goals at Swansea,
yep.
He set up, and the one at Fulham, which he scored on his own. he was able to sort of get on the ball outside the box and do stuff. That part's maybe just gone a little. Maybe it's a bit of fatigue or not enough support around him.
To me, that's the formation.
Sure,
that is 4-2-3-1, which means that Grabban is a little bit further forward. He's not able to come back and do that kind of really, because he's a strong lad.
Yeah.
And yet it also means the number 10, whether it be Silva or Carvalho, are going to be struggling because they're going to be in a position where they're not getting much of the ball, and when they do, they're going to get strong-armed off it pretty quickly. Whereas a 4-1-4-1, there's more people around them, and especially if it's a Sambar or an Alpha Semedo when he's been doing well, that gives, like you say, that security, I think. Stephen, do you think we've been found out tactically?
I think there is an element of that. Yeah, I think teams have worked out how to play against us. That's going to happen when you're a top team in this league and you're in form. You're up there to be shot at, and teams are going to come to the City Ground and they're going to make it difficult for Forest to play. They're not going to give much away, which probably also explains why Forest are more effective away from home. And on an individual level, I look at somebody like Joe Lolly. I think defenders have figured him out as well because he was the main threat last season. I think.
Well, on a very simple level, we've seen that this season teams have doubled up on him.
Yeah, is that just what I was going to say? They double up on him, force him inside, and when they do that, it doesn't matter because he's getting crowded out. And when he's going, he doesn't seem to want to or doesn't have the confidence to go round the defender and use his right foot and get balls into the box. I don't know if that's where you start switching the wings and getting him on the other side on his stronger left, and having him more as an auxiliary winger. I
mean, one of the interesting things with regard to that, I think, I can't remember, it might have been Totally Football Show I was listening to. One of the many quality football podcasts that are out there at the moment. But they're saying that if you're going to have inverted wingers, then it's really important you've got the fullbacks to support them, because for Lolly, he can, when he's got that moment, he cuts in, and he can either do an Arjen Robben and cut in and use his left foot to either float the ball in or to have a shot. But when it's going well, he's got Cash herring down the right-hand side, so he can do the reverse pass. And similarly with Adoma on the left, because he's a right footer on the left, he can either do that, cut inside, or he can dovetail, and let's be honest, okay, Ribeiro's the better one when it comes to attacking. And he can do that with Ribeiro, or Amiobi has done it quite well with Ribeiro at times. Now, the other thing, I'm just literally just thought of this as we're saying it, is that the fact that teams are doubling up on Lolly, could that also be why Amiobi's kind of been a little bit more prominent in recent matches as well? Just because he's getting more of the ball that way. But unfortunately, unlike Lolly, I'm not convinced that Amiobi's got the ability to always do something with it.
Yeah, he's a bit hit and miss when it comes to... I think he's best when he's sort of running deep with it and he sort of draws defenders in on him and sort of opens up space for others. Yeah, maybe that's the reason why he's getting more space. If you are doubling up in one area, you're one man short in another area. So that makes sense, I suppose.
Okay, we shall come back to discuss Lewis Grabban, as we said. We'll also have a think about the forthcoming January transfer window, and we shall also talk about the gaffer, Sabri LaMouche, just after this.
The Forest Ramble sketch by Jeremy Davis. With the famously frantic festive fixture schedule almost upon us, it's approaching the time of the season when thoughts turn to the FA Cup. With a glamour tie against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, Forest will be hoping to create some more third-round magic against a London club to go along with the win against Arsenal from a few seasons back when Eric Lehigh went full Lilian Thuram and came up with a couple of goals from right back. The Forest FA Cup story has been one of broken dreams since 1959, when it was a story of a broken leg after Roy Dwight picked up said injury shortly after scoring. Did you know he was Elton John's uncle? But many of the most memorable moments they have given us since then involve London teams, not least their only FA Cup final appearance in my lifetime in 1991. Forest actually played a team from London in the third round that year, as Crystal Palace came to Nottingham, complete with the angriest man in the jungle, Ian Wright. Although, funnily enough, the angriest man in the stadium that day was Brian Clough, who punched out Roy Keane for playing a dodgy back pass. After seeing off yet another London club, West Ham, in the semi-final, Forest walked out at Wembley on May the 18th, 1991, to face Spurs, in a match that, much like the modern Star Wars films, works better as part of a saga, despite being, as a standalone spectacle, really a little bit shit. The historical significance of the 91 final derives more from the characters involved than from the match or the result itself, bringing together some of English football's most significant figures from the 80s with some of those that dominated the 90s. Brian Clough, the greatest manager England never had, walked out hand-in-hand with Terry Venables, who may never have got the England job, and created all that rose-tinted Euro 96 nostalgia that still sells records to this day, without this win. Gary Lineker, England's biggest star of the previous decade, won his only domestic trophy in a match when he missed a penalty and had a goal disallowed. In fact, you could argue that if it hadn't been for future Wales keeper Mark Crossley, he might have become England's record goalscorer. It was only after seeing Crossley save the spot kick at Wembley that Lineker started trying Panenkas, which went so spectacularly wrong for him against Brazil a couple of years later, when he had the chance to score his 49th goal for England. England's most tragic-comic figure of the 90s, of course, was Paul Gascoigne. He enjoyed a touching embrace with Princess Diana in the pre-match lineup in a poignant moment that brought together tragedy and tragicomedy in a way that would have had Shakespeare going as green as the long grass of Wembley with envy. Gazza, of course, went on to shatter his knee in the act of fouling Gary Charles, the Forest right-back who would end up in prison, which was at least a step up from playing for Derby. Injuries were hugely significant on the day after Crossley, who had kept a dominant Spurs at bay during extra time, took a knock in the act of conceding a corner. Inside the stadium, my dad turned to me and remarked that if Spurs were going to score, now was the time. Sure enough, the ball came in, and Des Walker headed into his own net for the most spectacular Wembley own goal since Gary Mabbutt's for Tottenham against Coventry that gave the Sky Blues the cup and permanently ruined one of Monty Python's best routines. If you don't know the one I mean, just tap Eric Idle Coventry City FA Cup into a search engine of your choice. With a delicious irony of which the Pythons themselves would surely be proud, the stadium announcer actually credited the goal to Mabbutt himself. The only consolation for me, other than the brief high of watching Stuart Pearce thumping in a free kick for the opening goal, was that when I scored an own goal in the playground the following week, it's the only time in my unimpressive footballing life that I've been compared to an England international.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Merry Christmas to you, and you'll be back in the new year. So we've talked about things that have been going wrong, tactically, formation-wise, in terms of player performance and so on. I said I'd come back to Lewis Grabban. Marriage on the Midlands. Is Lewis Grabban the best centre-forward that Forest have had in the last 20 years?
No.
Who is? Who's been better than him as an all-round centre-forward in the last 20 years?
Marlon Harewood.
Better as an all-round centre-forward?
Yeah, but Marlon's I was far superior player than Marlon was, yeah. I would say, yeah, definitely.
Okay.
100%, yeah.
All right. Stephen?
What I would say to that is that Marlon never had to play as a lone striker. Certainly peak Marlon. He might have done under Steve Cotterill when he wasn't as effective, but certainly Marlon Harewood at his peak had David Johnson next to him, and they would just feed off each other, and you had Andy Reid supplying the bullets, and obviously it helped Marlon because he had the pace and power and the strength. He wasn't just scoring goals, but I think you kind of look at it relative to the size that they're playing in.
I would not just Marlon. I would say sort of Earnshaw, even Johnson, Sambar before his injury, Blackstock before his injury. I think they're all.
So what you're saying is you think that Lewis Grabban is maybe the 8th or 9th best centre-forward that we've had in the last 20 years?
He's top 6, but yeah. I wouldn't say he's head and shoulders above any of them, no.
If
I had a straight choice now between if you had...
All right, so which one of those forwards, given the way that Forest play with one centre-forward and in a 4-2-3-1 or 4-1-4-1 where the ball is coming through the midfield or out to the wings, which of those forwards would you choose?
I would probably go Marlon Harewood.
Well, I can't say I agree with you there. But anyway, so that's the thing. Everyone's got an opinion. Stephen, what about you?
I think Grabban is the best striker in the league in terms of all-round play. I think I look at the other strikers and they all have strengths and weaknesses, but I think his all-round play is very strong in that he drops deep to link up, he can pass the ball, he can create, and he can get in the box, and he's clinical. He's got everything that you would want in a modern-day striker.
I think you're both suffering from what the experts call recency bias, where the most recent player...
So what I would say about Marlon, just to counteract the point you've made, is that, and you just said it, is that the Forest, with Marlon being effective, they were playing a diamond formation. So,
but it was not just at Forest. He went on and played for years in the Premier
League. In a 4-4-2?
In a 4-4-2. He's a Premier League player. Lewis is never... If Lewis is so brilliant, why isn't there a Premier League club coming for him?
He's played in the Premier League.
Not very much.
Not very much, no. But neither did Marlon play very much.
Well, he did.
He played on and off for a couple of seasons.
Villa. He was...
and I suppose we focus on what he did in the Forest shirt.
He played a different game. At Forest, Marlon was most effective when is a diamond formation. He had someone in the number 10 role, a Huckabee or a Leicester, and then Johnson was pulling out to one side and Harewood to the other side, which meant that it was actually a three-pronged attack. In the Premier League at West Ham, when he had that brilliant season at West Ham, he was playing as part of a pair where he had someone else to do a lot of the donkey work for him. Grabban does the donkey work, and he has really good ability on the ball. You've got one of the best finishing rates. As a finisher, I would rate him probably with Earnshaw. As an all-rounder, I would say possibly with a Sambar, and as in terms of strength, I would say probably with Blackstock. And I'm not saying that because Harewood and Johnson aren't great centre forwards. They were brilliant, and they had the best. It's on record. They had the best partnership in the last 20 years. But I'm just saying that Grabban, for the role that he's playing, I cannot think of any forward in the last 20 years that I would swap him with. Stephen?
I would find it hard to disagree. It comes back to his all-round play. And I think what will help his cause is if he scores 20 goals a season, you tend to remember strikers who hit that 20-goal-a-season mark. He was on course for it last year until injury sort of hampered his season. In the same way that Sambar was on course for it before he got his bad injury a couple of years ago. It's the same thing. I think if Grabban hits 20 goals plus this season, that's really going to elevate him to the status of one of the best Forest strikers we've had since we've been out of the Premier League.
I say, the thing that I've been really impressed with, so you talked about his work sort of creating, some goals earlier in the season, both of you. But the thing that I've been very impressed with as well, his strength. So when he came on against Millwall, yeah, sure, he did some brilliant movement and finishing, and his movement, amazing, but also that strength. He gave the Millwall defence something to think about they hadn't had to think about before, because he's just got this amazing ability to hold people off. And Blackstock, he was good with strength, but he quite often fouled his defender in the process. Grabban doesn't do that as often. In terms of movement, I would say that actually he is probably up there with Harewood. And in terms of finishing ability, Earnshaw is the nearest parallel. But that's the thing. I'm comparing him with 3 or 4 separate forwards there.
He's almost doing the job of a Harewood and Johnson partnership. When you look at what he's doing for, where you could say like Johnson was a bit of a whippet kind of player. He had the pace to get in, but he had the finishing. Whereas Harewood had more strength and he had more physical presence. I think Grabban gives you the best of both.
I've got to disagree. I think he's good. He's a good finisher, but he's not as good a finisher as Earnshaw or Johnson or a Sambar. He lacks speed. He's not as quick as some of those players. And his hold-up play up, I'm quite disappointed with it a lot of the time. I don't think it sticks with him enough.
Okay, well,
if he's going to be like the best striker we've had in 20 years, he needs to hold the ball better than he does.
Just to change the subject though, ever so slightly in terms of that, he is having to do the work of many men. Now, I said in my Millwall report, and you alluded to it earlier, Rafa Mir was hung out to dry a little bit because a Forest centre-forward in this team has to do such a colossal amount of work, more than I think I've ever seen any team before, where the forward has to do the hold-up play, has to do the strength, has to do the movement, has to do the running, has to do the finishing on top of all of that. I'm not sure that I could have seen many other players being able to do that. And that is, to me, I think a huge amount of that is experience, natural ability, coaching. Was he as good a player at the age of 21 as Marlon Harewood was? No. But is he a better player at the age of 31 than Marlon Harewood was? Well, yeah. And that's not about making this Grabban versus Harewood. I'm just saying that I think that Grabban has, at this level, probably the most complete centre-forward. And you look at Leeds' problems with with Bamford up front, and it took so long for Bamford to get going. Now, Bamford might be able to do that brilliantly in 5 years' time, but Grabban is 5 years older than him, and he's doing it now.
And I think he's playing the best football of his career in a Forest shirt. If you compare him to last season, he's doing more work than he was doing under Karanka and O'Neill, no question. And I think Sabri is getting the absolute maximum out of him, and the team benefits from that.
Okay. Just to move on from there, I mean, we talked a lot about strength and pace and movement and so on with regard to Lewis Grabban. Stephen, there's a January transfer window coming up. You mentioned in your match report against Middlesbrough, maybe we need a bit more pace in the team, either in midfield or in the centre-forward position or in the wide areas. Would you like to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, it comes back to my point earlier where I said I think the starting 11 is top 6 and then the rest of the squad just drags it down slightly because I don't think we have enough options to change it up. And I think the good teams at this level have that ability to, if they need to, change the way they're playing, change personnel based on how a game is going. And the Middlesbrough game is a great example of that, where we were crying out for some more pace and some more movement to really stretch Middlesbrough. And I don't think that was available to Sabri. And yeah, he could have used the squad a bit better in rotation. I'm not denying that. But I also think he would be helped out by having just some more options available to him. You look at from the wingers, I look at somebody like a Jared Bowen who could come in. I'm not saying we're going to get Jared Bowen. I think a lot of Premier League clubs are going to be looking at him. But if not him, somebody like a Jed Wallace, you know, somebody who's got pace and creativity and who provides a different option to what we've got now. And then the striking option, I mean, we've waxed lyrical about Lewis Grabban, but you can't rely on him because, as we've seen, if he's out the team, we just look poorer for it. And you're asking Rafa Mir, who's not played a lot of football, to come in and do that job. And who knows, Rafa Mir might be able to do that job in a few years' time, but I don't think right now he's ready to replace Lewis Grabban. So that's where we need to look at probably a proven, experienced player to come in and just take a bit of the burden off Grabban's shoulders. We've been linked with Dwight Gale, and it seems like he is somebody that Forest is targeting. So perhaps he's the option who comes in and just gives us that option to rotate, or even a more experienced Championship option to put up alongside Grabban and increase the firepower of the squad.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we need huge amounts of players in. One or two players max. I agree with you. We do need some pace in the squad, and maybe a quick striker would tick both boxes of bringing in somebody playing on the wing or going up front as well. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure about Dwight Gale. I think for his age, he's 29 years old. The transfer fee they'd want.
They want 15 million, don't they?
Something like that, yeah. And I just don't think it's value for money.
Well,
especially,
I would think that sort of 20 million for Bowen is much better value for money than 15 for Gale.
And also, looking at Newcastle, they've only got Joel Linton and Carroll. Joel Linton's not scoring goals, and Andy Carroll's liable to get injured at any time. So I'm not sure they're desperate to sell Dwight Gale either. I mean, if we're spending that sort of money, maybe look at somebody like Morelos at Rangers. We might be able to tempt them to sell if we're really going to spend that much money. But I'd be very...
What sort of money would we be looking at for him?
I'm guessing same 12 to 15 million, I would guess.
Okay. Well, in which case, I'm just going to throw one out there, which is if we're looking at players who are playing in England or Scotland, who would cost about 15 million, I'd go Ollie Watkins. He can play... So, Bowen, I like Bowen a lot, but he's not a centre-forward. He can play any of those positions behind the forward, either wing or as a number 10. He could do a false 9, I suppose. But Watkins, he's really come on in the last 2 years. And he, initially a winger, had played as a number 10. Since Mopé's moved on from Brentford, he's been playing as the main centre-forward. And his strength and power has improved. He's got pace, he's got skill, he's got finishing. So, for me... if we're looking at that kind of ballpark figure, then that's who I would go for.
Having said all that, I would not pay that sort of money in January for anybody.
You took the words out of my mouth.
Because chances are, I think automatic promotion's gone now, so chances are we were just playing for a playoff spot. And so I think, given that, it's a 90% chance we're going to be playing in the Championship next season anyway. We're going to end up overpaying now for a player, and I'd rather we take our time in the summer and get somebody in. If we're going to spend that sort of money, who we know we're not overpaying on wages, we're not overpaying in a transfer, we're not blowing our FFP out the water, I think it's a lot more likely and a lot more preferable that we'll pick up somebody completely off the radar, like we've been doing in the last transfer window, from maybe abroad somewhere.
Well, I think that's it, isn't it? Is that we talked about it in part one. Recruitment-wise, Forest have taken a slightly different tack in the last 6 to 9 months, and so, as we discussed in November's podcast, I think there's every chance it's going to be someone we haven't heard of coming from Portugal or France or Spain or somewhere like that, either on loan or for a much lower fee, because it's still the case that players who are playing in British football have a price tag premium. And is that worth paying? I don't know. What's your view, Stephen?
I think when you're at this stage in January and you're in Forest's position where you are in the playoffs or now on the verge of them, now we've dropped down to 8th, you are in a position of strength because you've had a good first half of the season. And when you're in a position of strength, you carry on strengthening. I'm not saying go and spend 20 million on a player and, throw money around like it's confetti, but you've got to look at the squad, and if you want to kick on in the second half of the season, you do have to strengthen. So it might be a case that we spend. I mean, Lewis Grabban cost £6 million about 18 months ago, so he would have been 28, 29 when he signed. 29. So 6 million. That's the kind of figure you're looking at, I think, to spend again for a player who can compete with him. And I think I wouldn't pay any more than about 6 million for Dwight Gale, because I don't think he's worth 15. I don't think he's worth anywhere near that.
No,
but that's what he's worth to Newcastle at the moment, because they've got no
the
backup.
The other thing is he's another one of those players who becomes better the less he plays. So he had a really good season with West Brom last season. He's not played half a season, and so everyone's going, Dwight Gale's exactly the kind of man we need. Not just Forest.
I like Dwight Gale ever since his Peterborough days, and when I remember speaking to you about him when he was at Palace, saying he'd be a good signing for Forest, but that was years ago, and he wouldn't have cost anywhere near £15 million at the time.
The other name that's cropped up quite a few times is Lawrence Shankland, who's at Dundee United, and who's scoring goals for fun. I might be wrong on this, I think he was at Ayr United before, and he's moved on to Dundee, and he's scoring goals at a regular rate, and his name has cropped up again. He'll be a cheaper option than Dwight Gale, but it's the unproven thing. Yeah. Can he then make a step up to Championship?
So the only reason I've heard of him is because a couple of weeks ago on Twitter, I just saw loads of people say, yeah, man, this guy's the guy to do it. It's like, you've never heard of him. Yeah. You've never even heard of him, so how do you know? And I'm not saying that that's wrong. I'm just saying that, obviously, we get bandwagons that get jumped on.
The worst case scenario, I think, is that we recall Walker from Lincoln. I think that's if we can't sign anybody, I think we'll have to do that.
Well, the thing, I mean, actually, in that sense, if I have no idea if that's viable to recall him, because I think season-long loans, they're sometimes quite difficult to do that. But Tyler Walker, I like a lot about him. It's from when we saw him burst through as a really skinny teenager who's just got bounced off the ball all the time. He is stronger. He's more powerful. He's still got pace, but he's also got a little bit more know-how. I think playing a couple of seasons in the divisions below will have given him a lot more more of a streetwise nature, which is what he was lacking before. I agree with you. It's as a backup plan. Could that be viable? Quite possibly. Stephen, I see you're busy doing some research there.
Well, I'm just looking into some of the names that have been linked with Forest and Shankland in particular. And he's scoring a goal a game. It's like 20 games, 20 goals, 24 years old.
Okay.
So he's at an age where...
So it's a good age.
It's a good age, he's maturing, but he's still got a long way to go.
And what kind of forward is he?
Well, it's a good question. You've just caught me on the hop. This is what I'm trying to find out.
Is he pacey? Is he big? Is he a number 9? Is he...
He looks like he's got more pace about him rather than brute physical strength. And he looks like more just of a poacher.
Yeah.
which might be, coming back to what you said about having pace up front, might be that compensation of getting pace into the team. He might be that kind of option who is prepared to make runs in behind the fence and stretch defences that way.
And what sort of price tag are we talking about again?
Well, it's looking like it's going to be a couple of million. I think the worry is that Dundee are in a position now where they can just stick a big price tag on him because he's scoring goals. And you've got teams like Celtic, other Championship clubs like Swansea and Hull have been linked with him as well.
The other worry is it's Scotland. And we've had players come down from Scotland before and not really done anything. So
Yes, Jason Cummings.
yeah.
Okay, just on the subject of the transfer window again, do we see anyone going out? I mean, we've still got some of those bomb squad players, to use the phrase. So Bridcut is currently on loan at Bolton. I would imagine if Bolton can make that permanent, they probably will do. But we've still got Zach Clough, Pantilimon and Claudio Jacob who are hanging around. I think Clough's played quite a few under-23 games, hasn't he? But the other two have kind of been bombed out, haven't they?
I'm sure they're trying to get rid of them. If there had been an option for people to sign them, I'm sure they would have given them free transfers already and cancelled the contract. So I'm guessing there's not that much interest at the moment, but that might intensify during the transfer window. So yeah, possibly they might go.
And of course, you know, it's that classic cautionary tale, isn't it? You sign players on big contracts in the way that we did, and it's going to cost more to let them go than it is to keep them on the books, which means that they're just hanging around. Now, that's not, you know, all accounts are that apparently they're being very kind of pragmatic and professional about it, and LaMouche is maintaining good relations, but it's not what you want, really, is it? Just on the subject of young players, we know that LaMouche seems to like young players a little bit more than Karanka did, and we've seen Yates and Cash sign their new contracts. Joe Worrell's very happy here. The word on the street is that Alex Myton's, they want to tie him down to a new contract before he even gets near the first team.
I think he just signed one.
He's just signed one.
Has he?
Yeah,
right. Breaking news.
Signed one this week. So
Okay.
that's a positive move. You're tying down your young players to deals, and
even if it ends up being an Arvin Apaya situation, then in terms of the club's health, that's probably a strong sign, isn't it?
Sure.
Regardless of whether you like what they do with it. Any other players you can see being surplus to requirements? Bearing in mind we talked earlier about how the squad isn't quite as big as it was.
Ideally, they might want to get rid of another centre half, but I can't. Both the ones they want to get rid of haven't played a game so far this season, so I can't see that happening.
Ben Luan.
Benoit and Hefele.
While you may think that history is vaguely interesting, the truth is it's fun and metal AF.
Echoes of the past are still reverberating through our world today, and Body Count is here to show you how our shared history affects your life on the daily.
Whether you know it or not. So, are you past the point of higher education?
Feel like you didn't learn anything from your high school history teacher?
Or just didn't give a flying crap about it?
Are you tired of always missing out on the yellow history pie piece in Trivial Pursuit?
Are you the horror of all your friends' game nights?
Did you once proudly announce that Napoleon Bonaparte was a super short little nutsack?
When in reality, he was an average-sized nutsack.
Have you been thinking about living under a faulty dam?
Or perhaps an active volcano?
Well, we have good news. It's not too late for you or your homeowner's insurance.
Come on over and listen to Body Count, the podcast that explores death and disaster through the ages with only one rule.
Someone, or usually a lot of someones, dies.
Because history doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes.
A proud member of the MSE Podcast Network.
So the story this season has been about Sabri LaMouche, another charismatic manager in a very different way from the charisma that the last two managers had. And by it, we've got through a few, so we should learn to read them. Now, LaMouche has become a popular figure, Stephen. He has become a popular figure. He seemed to be getting his tactical decisions and his team selection decisions right early this season. Forest have hit a bit of a sticky patch, and let's not forget, historically, Forest aren't good in December. So.
Yeah,
but,
we haven't mentioned that, have we? We are recording this in December, and maybe that's it's like you know, Christmas is coming around in December, and you also know Forest's form is going to fall off a cliff.
Yeah, we're being very generous to those around us. Okay, what's your kind of halfway point view on Saturday. I suppose it's not even halfway because he literally joined us 2 weeks before the season started.
Yeah, he didn't even have the full pre-season, did he? Progress, I think he's done a fantastic job so far. Cannot fault him, really. To get Forest in the position that they're in with, you know, a team when you're playing, you've brought a young player like Worrell in and he's improving consistently through the season. You're still using players like Yates as well. You've got getting game time out of Ben Watson, who looks like he was on his way out. You know, as a whole, the team has looked solid and competitive in most games, and I'm hoping that the last couple of games has just been a bit of a blip, which can happen over the course of a 46-game season, and I'm hoping that we can come out the other side of it and kick on again, because one thing that's impressed me about Sabri is he learns from things. When he's got selections wrong, he's generally put them right. In a game, if things aren't going our way, he's usually quite good at turning it round.
So
and making
Wigan, we didn't get the results, but he made some changes, and we looked like we could potentially have come back in if the wind had blown in the right direction. I mean, Millwall is the classic example. Swapped it at half time, put Figueiredo to right back as a holding thing to see if that got Forest looking better. It did look better, so it meant that Toby was sacrificed. Unfairly, I thought, by the way, but that's another story. And meant that we reverted back to the 4-1-4-1 that had worked so well. And that got us back in the match and nearly snuck us all the points.
Yeah. He's not completely immune from criticism, because there are some decisions he's made and you do wonder, well, kind of what was he thinking there? Like Wigan, like Millwall, changing it up. But then he's put it right. And I think that's just a sign of a manager who's learning. He's still new to English football, still new to the Championship, and still getting to know his squad, I think, as well. And I wouldn't be too critical of him at this stage, because I think to get Forest up and in the playoff places and challenging the best teams in this league, I think that's a job well done so far.
Okay, Maradona the Midlands. And we were talking about the playoff places, and you said, you know, top two's out of reach, but that's probably because Leeds and West Brom are the only teams who are consistently winning week in, week out, isn't it?
Sure, yeah. I mean, normally in a season, you look to sort of, as a benchmark, 2 points per game to be in with a chance of automatic promotion, and they're both outstripping that at the moment. And they're just so consistent and just keep on finding a way to secure the points. Even this week when they've had a sticky patch, West Brom changed a few players over at Wigan, but they still managed to come away with a draw. And
of course, West Brom this season still, like last year, they're not immune to having a dodgy dive in the last minute to get a point back.
And Leeds, even though they threw it away against Cardiff, they still managed to get a point out of it. So
the question is with Leeds and whether this is also a question with West Brom, we don't know, but we know that with Leeds and Bielsa teams generally, they tend to run out of steam in the last quarter of the season because they play such an intense style of football. Now, going back to my theory earlier that I mentioned to Stephen, I think that Forest have hit a bit of a sticky patch because, you know, maybe the players are a bit fatigued, and I think that LaMouche's style of football does ask players to do quite a lot, but in a good way, because as you mentioned, to name three, Cash, Worrell and Watson are all better players now for us than they ever have been before.
Sure. I think, but the teams ahead of us, they've built up a bit of a cushion now. So even if they do hit a sticky patch, it's relying on the teams below them, like Forest, Preston and Fulham, to have similar sort of consistency that they've had. I just can't see the teams below stringing together 6 wins in a row. No. And I can't see the teams above losing sort of 4 or 5 games in a row either.
No. So we're saying that top twos, barring a disaster, even if Leeds have a fall away, they should probably be home and hosed by that point, shouldn't they? Yeah. But top two's probably out of reach. But
I think out of the two, Leeds would be the one that you potentially could catch, but you need to go on a good run, and you've just got to you've got to be 6, 7, 8 games unbeaten to really cement the place.
I think it's worth remembering, bearing in mind that naturally after what's been a bit of a sticky month or sticky few weeks, naturally there's a little bit of despondency around, but you know, not to clutch at straws too much, but win that game in hand, and we're still level on points with Preston in third. So in that sense, has there been progress being made? Absolutely. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. And I think part of the frustration is when you see how tight that top six has become, people are going to look at that and think, "Oh God, if only Forest could have won 2 or 3 more games, they'd be home. They'd be well away and just clear and comfortably in the playoffs." And they've not managed to do that.
Well, if only my auntie used Manscaped, she'd be my uncle.
Well,
So.
no, I think it's that sense of we've self-inflicted it to an extent.
Isn't that just a lot of a football fan? You
Well,
know,
no,
you
well-
either fall into the we've been unlucky, or gosh, we've thrown it all away.
No, I mean just in the sense that we threw away the lead at Millwall in the last minute. We let a terrible Middlesbrough team in with a penalty. Just the Wigan game, just things like just if we picked up 2 or 3 extra points, 4 points there and there, we'd sort of be. That's just a frustration, because having gone to places like Fulham and won, and Swansea and won, and Leeds have got a draw, to throwing away the points against sort of the weaker teams, it's just that.
But isn't that what Forest fans say every year? Though?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And I think because we've seen it before, especially in December, where in the past you'll have a first 4 months of the season, everything goes well, team's looking good, you get to December, the form falls away, suddenly questions are being asked of the manager, that carries on into January, then
But having said that,
we pull the
I
trigger.
mean,
I'm hoping we don't do that this
No,
year.
no. I was just going to say is that
It's like
LaMouche's
deja
got a
vu.
lot more credit in the bank than Karanka did this time last season.
Yeah, I mean, I remember saying the broadcast this time last year that it could just be a blip. We hopefully will turn it around. So,
But having said that, we're talking about style of play. We're talking about, Karanka was
in terms of career,
he
was spiky.
He's a bit spiky, and also by this time last year he'd had his falling out.
Yeah, and he wasn't as likeable as LaMouche. So LaMouche's got a lot more going for him.
But
in that
also,
sense.
you look at the way Forest play. So, as Baz has discussed in the past, Karanka didn't really believe in midfield other than having 2 stoppers and spoilers in midfield, and he wanted everything to go, well, mainly sort of up the wings and make the most of Carvalho, whereas LaMouche's style of play involves the whole team a lot more. It's a little bit more progressive in terms of style of play. And the other thing is under Karanka is that, we didn't always look amazing, even when we were getting results. And I think there's been more matches this season where Forest have looked good, even though there have obviously been some where you've ground out wins.
I mean, the away games especially, we've just looked like a quality team, and it's been a bit odd as a Forest fan watching these away performances and being totally and utterly comfortable in the second half. Wow, we're winning, and not being completely depressed. I think back to QPR, Stoke away. And we've just been, wow, we're actually doing well.
Okay. If things still keep going, let's say consistently, are we worried about losing LaMouche, bearing in mind that he hasn't got a contract beyond the end of the season, and as Radio Nottingham pointed out, he is, he'll make a wry smile and look at the list of Forest managers, most of whom haven't lasted longer than 6 months. Is that a problem?
Well, ideally, you'd want your manager to have a longer contract than 6 months left when he's doing well. But I can't see anybody coming in for him right now. I think he's going to have to prove a bit more to get that Premier League job. But ideally, you'd sort of want in a dream situation. Then we'll be sitting here and doing the podcast next month, and we'll have turned around the form. We've got our injuries back. We've got a new striker in, and LaMouche signed a new contract. That would be a perfect situation.
Yes, Manscaped has redesigned the electric trimmer. The lawnmower... For God's sake. I'm sorry, I can't do it. I need a minute. I'm sorry.